All right, it's time for day 6 of the BERNINA L890 Airy Top and Comfy Dress Sew Along. In our previous video, we sewed up the airy top in our woven fabric, and today we'll be sewing up the knit version. You'll recognize some of the construction from the previous top, but some will be different due to the fact that it's a knit, and the construction between knits and wovens often differs. So grab your knit pieces and we'll head over to our machines and get assembling. Okay, to start, we're going to lay our back out face up. Then we're going to take our front with right sides together. We're going to align both shoulders. So we'll get the ends. And then the center. And then again, ends. And center. Now we're going to use our 4-thread overlock stitch to stitch across both shoulders. And the reason we're using the 4-thread is the second needle. So the 4th thread has 2 needles. So the second needle adds more stability to the garment so it can hold up to wear and tear. The 4th thread still has great stretch, but just that added stability is really nice when you're actually assembling garments with your serger. Now, we're going to be using 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you can see that it's just off the foot a bit. So just note where that aligns with. It's basically the edge of the O. So I'm going to align the first shoulder. And we are going to be cutting a bit off on this one. So we'll just start sewing. Don't forget to remove your pin. Make sure everything's aligned. And keep stitching across. Now, rather than cut right here, what I'm going to do is stitch a length. Then I'm going to start sewing my second shoulder. And I'll tell you why I did that in a minute. Now with a knit, you're not going to stay stitch your neckline or anything like that. So having this just keeps you from really stretching it out. There's only so far your neckline can go. So leave that on for now. We'll cut that off later. All right, we now need to press our seam allowances. So here we have the back of the garment. We're going to press them towards the back. And our shoulders are now pressed. Now before we leave the ironing board, we want to take both of our sleeves. We're just going to press them in half the long ways with the wrong sides together. So just align those. Press. And the second one. Align. And press. Now lay your shirt out with the right side facing up. We're going to attach the sleeve here. So grab your sleeve, find the center notch, and align that with the shoulder seam. From there, we're going to find this notch for the sleeve. Align that, and then same for the other side. Now again, we want to pin the center of that so it's aligned properly. Now what we're going to do is head over to our machine and use our 4 thread overlock stitch to sew the sleeve to the armhole. And when we sew this one, we don't want to cut anything off. We're just going to sew right along the edge. So let's go do that now. Okay, so first what you're going to want to do, raise your needle. You can do that by pushing backwards on your presser foot. And we're going to align our sleeve like so. And again, for this one, we're not going to cut anything off. We're just going to align with the inside edge of the knife. Remove your pins as you approach them. Again, you do not want to cut those pins. Make sure your seam allowance is in the right direction. And keep working across. All right, so now I'm just going to raise my needle, raise my presser foot, and just get that fabric out of the way. And then just sew out of there. So you now have your sleeve attached. And here you can see at the edge, it just goes right off the edge nicely. All right, so our sleeve is sewn on. We are now going to press it away from the garment. So again, I find this easier on a ham because of the area here that's not quite flat. And you're also pressing the seam allowance away because we want this whole seam line to still be straight. And I'm not pulling super hard or anything. I don't want to push it out of alignment or stretch the fabric too much. Okay, so you're just going to repeat that step for the other side. Okay, now that our sleeve is pressed, it's time to sew up the side seam. So for this, just lay everything out. We're going to fold the right side over the wrong side. Then I'm going to snip this off. We're going to align the underarm. Put a pin here. And then align the side seam. So I start with the bottom. And just get that all lined up nicely. Now we're going to start at the hem and we're going to sew up, pivot, and then sew the underarm. The reason we want to start from the hem is that we have these 2 seam allowances here, and they're going to naturally want to go under the foot in this direction. If we were sewing from here, they would naturally want to uncurl, and you'd have kind of a mess of seam allowances there. So we're going to start at the hem, again using our 4-thread overlock stitch. Sew up, pivot, and sew to the end. So I'll show you how to do that now. Okay, so here we are at the machine. I have my large table on to support my fabric. And we are again going to use the 1/2-inch seam allowance. This will also ensure that we catch everything at this corner. So align your fabric. And start sewing. Just gonna realign everything there. Remove your pins. And here we are at the corner. So I'm going to remove that pin. And as I approach it, I'm just going to rotate my pattern piece out the sleeve. So just rotating. And sewing off the edge. So get a nice tail there because we're going to want to anchor that. So the tail we're going to use to anchor the stitching. So again, you're going to need a large eye blunt needle. You're going to thread your serger tail through. And then I just bring it down through the stitching, pull it through, move down 1 or 2 stitches, and then bring it back up. Clip it, and that edge is now secure. Now we need to press the seam allowance, so head over to your ironing board. So we now need to press our side and underarm seam. Again, we want this to fall to the back of the garment. I'm just pressing, I'm not really pulling or anything like that. Again, you don't want to drag things out of shape. And then here we are at the underarm. Just give that a little pressure. And that's good. So now you just need to repeat those steps for the other side. Now the first thing we're going to do for our neckline is, again, we're going to fold the long edge to meet each other. And this just saves us some trouble later on. Give that a nice good press and then head back over to the table. All right, now with the right side facing up, unfold what you just pressed. Bring the short sides over to meet. And then we're going to head over to the machine and we're going to just sew this edge. We're going to use the same 4-thread stitch that we've been using. Now again, we're going to keep that same seam allowance, 1/2 inch. Sew right across, and I'm going to trim my tails, but I'm going to leave a little bit. The reason for this is I feel like it unravels less as you work that way. So now we're going to do that same thing we did for the sleeves of the woven, where we press 1/2 to one side and 1/2 of the seam allowance to the other. That way when we fold it, we have a nice flat area. All right, so here we are pressing. And since we already folded that line in, it's really easy to get our neckband ready to go. If you have a really curly knit, you may want to just give it another quick press right now. That'll kind of help keep things in place for our next step. And now we need to go attach this to our neckline. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do to attach our neckband is clip that little string off of the neckline. I'm going to set this aside for 1 second, and we're just going to talk about the neckband. So I like to fold it along the back seam and then put a pin here to mark the halfway point. So now we've halved the neckline, or the neckband. From there, align that pin with the back seam and mark the quarters of the neckband. Set that aside, and we're going to do the same for the neckline. So to start, we're going to align the 2 shoulder seams and align the neckline back to the center back. And then same for the front. Shoulder seams are aligned, and then we're just walking the neckline down to the center front. Make sure you're not stretching, just nice and easy. Now from there, we'll quarter. So bring the center front to the center back. Walk the neck edge out to one side and then over to the other. So we have now quartered our neckline and quartered our neckband, so it's going to be a lot easier to align things. Now to align them, I like to start at the center back. And again, that is the seam line on your neckband. Pin that in place. Then align the first quarter. Your center front. And the last quarter. So now you could go over to your machine and just sew around this, stretching as you sew, but if you're worried about that, you can align the centers of each of those sections, just so you have a little extra guidance at the machine. So you just hold on to the 2 pins, stretch lightly, and pin. And continue that as you work around the neckline. All right. Now our neckband is pinned in place, and it's time to sew around it to attach it. Again, we'll be using our 4-thread overlock stitch. It's a very popular stitch for this garment, so let's go do that now. So I'm going to once again remove my slide-on table. That way I just have a little extra movement with this, because it's going to want to kind of come right around into that free arm area. Just going to align my neck edge. And this one, we are not cutting anything off. This is just going to be a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which will align perfectly with the inside edge of the knife. So just start sewing. Making sure you're evenly stretching the neckband to fit. You're going to want to rotate every now and then, realign things, and make sure everything's lining up at the inner edge. Now here we are at the shoulder seam, so make sure that's pointed in the right direction. And if it's not the end of the world. It just keeps bulk down. Remove that pin. And again, stretch lightly to fit. And also make sure everything's aligned properly as you go. Here we are at the second shoulder seam. Again, make sure that's in the right direction. And you'll have no trouble sewing over that. That's not going to phase the machine at all. And we are back at our final edge. So what I like to do is I do like to go back over what I already sewed just a bit. And then just cut off with a tail. Now again, what we're going to do is we're going to embed this tail into the seam allowance so that it stays in place. So again, thread your needle. All right, you can see the wrong side's facing up here, so I'm just going to go in a few stitches. And then back a few stitches. Cut that. And it's time to press your neckline. Okay, so now we need to press the neckline. So what we're going to do is we're going to press the neckline up and the seam allowance down. Again, I'm doing this on a hand because the neckline sits in a curved position on the body, so this will give you the best shape. Here we are back at the front. Okay, our neckline is now attached, and the only thing we have left is the hem. So that is an easy one. You're gonna flip your shirt wrong side out. And then you're gonna press up 3/4 of an inch. And again, you can pin this in place if you like. I don't find that I need to, so I'm not going to. but that is totally up to you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our machine and we are going to use a new stitch, the cover stitch, which we haven't used yet in either garment. And we're going to use that to hem this in place. The cover stitch is great for knits. It has a bit of stretch. And if you look at the bottom of any ready-to-wear t-shirt you have, you'll see the 2 lines of stitching with a single looper on the back going back and forth between each needle. That's exactly what we're going to do here. All right, so to sew my cover stitch, I'm going to align the edge of my fabric with this edge of the knife underneath, and that should catch the edge with the needles. So start sewing around. Rotate every now and then, make sure everything's in the right spot. Now we're back at the beginning, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to raise my needles, raise my presser foot, and again, pull the 2 needle threads out, clip them, and then pull straight back to anchor. And then you can clip all those threads off. Okay, so we have caught the entire hem, but you'll see we have this extra flopping over the edge. All we're going to do is we're just going to trim that off. So I'm just going to work around, trimming. So just keep moving around. Make sure you don't cut the fabric underneath or your stitches. You don't need to get that close. Just trim off the extra. There we go. And you can see I am leaving a little bit behind because I don't want to get too close and cut that looper thread. You can see there's no skewing. It's just a really nice flat hem. I really love the cover stitch on this machine. You don't ever really have to mess with it. It's great. And just a little bit heading into the side seam here. And that's it. Okay, so that is it for sewing up the Airy top. We've now sewn it up in both a woven and a knit, and we've just got the comfy dress left until our trio of garments is complete. I hope seeing the construction of the same top in 2 different fabrications was educational and opened your minds as to what you can do with your L890 and some imagination. Our next video is also our final as we sew up the comfy dress. I'll see you back here for that, and if you have any questions, just please let us know.